Hi there. My name is Shelby, and I'm a licensed substance abuse counselor at the Jackie Nitschke Center here in gorgeous Green Bay, Wisconsin. This video is the second in a series that I will be presenting, and will discuss what roles family members play in addiction, how the family experiences addiction, and the steps that they can take to recognize and correct these behaviors. In my previous video, I discussed the basics of what addiction is. However, this video will be more focused on how loved ones play a role. The purpose of this video is to educate loved ones of those struggling with substance abuse and to hopefully shed some light on why we as loved ones may do some of the things we do when someone we love is struggling with addiction. As I did for my first video, I will continue to refer to alcohol as a drug, so that drug can be used as an all-encompassing term. With the alarmingly high rates of addiction in the United States alone, it's very likely that you yourself know someone that has struggled in the past or is currently struggling with substance abuse. Please remember, no matter what the situation is, that you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. Obviously, the first step is recognizing that there is a problem. In this case, the problem is alcoholism or drug addiction. This problem generally affects the entire family, even if it's indirectly causing conflict or lack of communication with family members and loved ones. The solution for addiction is that it can be treated but not cured. With that being said, we can only treat ourselves while encouraging our loved ones to change themselves for the better. Today we are going to examine the truth of how reactions to unacceptable behaviors have been hurting us as loved ones and not truly helping the chemical dependence in our lives get better. Please try your best to refrain from judging or blaming yourself for this disease, as these reactions you had were the best you could do at the time. The first thing I want to discuss is powerlessness, which is something a lot of people may feel when it comes to their loved one's addiction. Whether it's feeling frustrated, maybe even confused regarding the choices the person struggling with substance abuse has made, I want to assure you that this is a completely normal and valid thing to feel. As friends or family members, we want what is best for our loved ones, so when we see them struggling, suffering, or in pain, it's definitely something that can be difficult to cope with. But the good news is that although you aren't in control of what choices other people make, you are in control of your own choices. Once we accept that addiction is a disease of the brain, we can move away from the blame game that we may often play, blaming ourselves or our loved ones, and focus more on what we can control, such as our attitudes, our behaviors, how we react, etc. This can help us regain some sanity and peace in our lives. How much the family is affected by addiction largely depends on how long they've lived with it, how advanced the disease is, how much shame and secrecy surround it, and the roles and responsibilities of the person with the chemical dependency. If the issue is left untreated, family members will also develop destructive behaviors in order to keep the family afloat. It's important to remember throughout this video that as loved ones, you did the best you could in the moment with the tools you had. The disease of addiction causes complete chaos, and the ripple effect that this causes goes further than one might think. The coping skills and behaviors that loved ones have learned have been the way that they have survived in the face of this cunning and baffling disease. Once you acknowledge these past behaviors, no matter how right or wrong they were, you can begin to change. We can't change what we don't realize is wrong, right? The next thing I want to talk about is shame and how this can keep the family sick. Something that we say to those in recovery is that we're only as sick as our secrets. In this case, it is also applicable to family and friends, as shame plays a large part in keeping things secret and swept under the rug due to fear of embarrassment, as well as the stigma that people struggling with addiction will experience. Others may not understand addiction and may therefore blame the family or might even think that the person's drug use is a result of having a weak moral compass, both of which we know is untrue. Shame and fear are powerful motivators for loved ones to keep their secrets, which in turn prevents positive changes. Remember denial, that little big elephant in the room I talked about in my previous video? Denial occurs when people don't recognize or maybe even flat out refuse to admit that their loved one's substance abuse is causing serious problems in their life, whether it's losing their job, getting an OWI, maybe even a divorce, or losing friends and family because of their continued use, things like that. As the person's disease continues, because remember, it is a progressive disease, the family member's level of denial also progresses until the truth of the situation becomes so obvious and the crisis so dramatic that denial doesn't cut it anymore. Some particular examples of denial are, they seem sober today, I think they're better now. This drinking and drug use is just a phase, they'll grow out of it. If they would just stop using, all of our family problems would be solved. Their job is so stressful, if they didn't have all these stressors in their life, they wouldn't drink so much. Do any of these sound familiar to you? It's okay if they do. Remember, the point of this video is not to make you feel bad about past attitudes or behaviors, but rather to recognize them. An analogy that I like to use to relate to the progression of denial involves a frog and a pot of water. If you throw a frog in a boiling pot of water, they're going to immediately jump out, right? But if you place a frog in a pot full of room temperature water and slowly increase the heat over a prolonged period of time, chances are they're going to sit in the pot until they cook to death. The same mentality can be applied to how denial in the family progresses with the family member's substance abuse. It's not something that happens overnight, and as it moves forward, the family will make changes to acclimate in order to hold on to some semblance of control. Denial isn't always a bad thing. It's a part of the grief process, and it protects us from feeling all of the grief and truth at once. However, with addiction, denial must be addressed or treatment cannot take place. If denial isn't resolved, it can lead to various issues such as expecting the chemical dependent to be rational, expecting the chemical dependent to control their use, and accepting blame, all of which are like beating your head against the wall. They're not going to get you anywhere. I also briefly touched on something in the last video called enabling, and I'm going to get more in depth with enabling here. Enabling is behaviors that allow the chemical dependent to avoid the consequences of their use. Some examples of enabling include paying rent or bills for the chemical dependent, picking up after them, maybe doing their chores or taking on responsibilities for them, flushing their drugs or pouring out their alcohol, calling in sick for them so that they don't lose their job, controlling their behaviors like, let's not go to so-and-so's birthday party this year, lying for the chemical dependent, and avoiding the issue to simply keep the peace. People need consequences. Our behaviors don't change unless the negatives outweigh the positives. This is particularly difficult in the case of addiction, which affects the decision-making process in the brain, which is all the more reason for them to experience these negative consequences in order to break down their denial. There is, however, a difference between enabling and support. Supporting the chemical dependent in your life would include helping them with things that they are capable of doing for themselves, or doing things that help facilitate them gaining control of their behaviors and life. Examples of this could be letting the chemical dependent experience their repercussions of their actions, offering to drive the chemical dependent to a recovery meeting versus giving them money for gas, and setting healthy and clear boundaries with the chemical dependent. If you find yourself questioning whether your choices are enabling or supportive, ask yourself this: is this something that they can do for themselves? If the answer is yes, chances are it's an enabling behavior. But if the answer is no, then that's something to look further into and discuss with the chemical dependent. I do also want to take a few moments to talk about codependency, which can be a big scary word for a lot of people. But it is an important one to understand, especially in this context. Codependency works on a continuum, and everyone falls somewhere on this spectrum. It just so happens that loved ones of chemical dependence tend to fall further to the side of codependent behaviors. The goal for recovery is to continue progressing towards interdependent behaviors. Codependency is about over-functioning in someone else's life while under-functioning in your own. Does this sound familiar to anyone? It means you're centering your own life around someone else's and not taking care of your own. This also limits a person's growth because it's keeping them away from their responsibilities. It can even cause you to lose yourself in someone else. If any of the following sound familiar to you, you may be overfunctioning in someone else's life. Giving, fixing, caretaking, helping, serving, people-pleasing, conflict avoiding, thinking or speaking for others, taking over, controlling, and doing for others what they need to do for themselves. When you underfunction in your own life, you could be neglecting your own health, finances, work, and relationships, and this could lead to developing problems of your own, such as physical or psychological problems, including ulcers, anxiety, and depression, or ethical and legal problems, including lying, misrepresentation, and bankruptcy. Similar to a teeter-totter that is perfectly balanced, you want to find that healthy balance of focus on yourself and focus on others, rather than focusing your energy too much on one side. Al-Anon suggests that our own recovery depends on keeping the focus on ourselves and not the chemical dependent. This recovery is about developing a healthy, independent self. An example of healthy self versus going too far could be making offers within your resources, not making offers outside of your resources such as time, money, things like that. Another could be making suggestions and leaving them alone, not insisting upon your suggestions or doing it for them. When working towards a healthy self, we want to manage and control our own life, bring the focus back to ourselves, take care of ourselves, and express ourselves. These may sound like simple behaviors, but they're not always easy. Just as in recovery for chemical dependence, we want to stress the importance of progress, not perfection. Recovery is a process, not an event. The next portion of this video is going to discuss family rules and roles, because as the addiction progresses, the denial and attempts to control and maintain some sort of balance within the chaos increases. Loved ones often find themselves unequipped to cope with this, and it is impossible to be unaffected. Some characteristics that will appear include denial, enabling, avoiding, withdrawing, minimizing, and blaming. An example of each characteristic could be denying that the loved one has a problem altogether, enabling the chemical dependent by giving them money, avoiding the problem and simply not addressing the chaos, withdrawing from other friends and activities due to concern over the chemical dependence issues, minimizing the severity of their disease, maybe saying, oh, they only drink on weekends, and blaming, maybe blaming the chemical dependence job or relationships as an excuse of why they use. Here are some examples of family rules, and oftentimes these rules are unspoken. It's not okay to talk about your problems. It's not okay to talk about or express feelings, especially not negative ones. Don't address issues or relationships directly. Always be strong, good, perfect, etc. Don't be selfish. Do as I say, not as I do. It's not okay to play. Don't rock the boat. And for sure, don't talk about the obvious issue in the family. Based off of these unspoken rules, roles are developed within the family system to help ensure that the rules are maintained and to bring some sense of balance and belonging into the family. All roles seek to take attention off of the chemically dependent person and are not chosen by each person. They just sort of happen. These roles can show up in any dysfunctional family system, and you can be in more than one role at a time, depending on the number of members in your family. The roles are not rigid and are not always clear, as you can change roles as the family structure changes. Maybe someone passes away, maybe there's a divorce, maybe a child moves away for college, in order to continue providing balance in the family. It's also a possibility that you can take on various components of multiple roles, especially if it's a small family and some roles are not filled in the family dynamic. These roles are not black and white by any means. The first role is that of the chemical dependent. They're saying, "Don't look at me, I don't have a problem, leave me alone." Their role in the family is actively engaging in addictive thoughts and behaviors that disrupt all parts of the family system. Their characteristics are denial, minimization, and rationalization. Because this video is geared more towards family members and friends, I want to focus more on the roles that they are more likely to fall into. The next role in the family system is the chief enabler, who says, "Look at me, don't worry, I'll fix it." Their role in the family is to take on the responsibilities and minimize the consequences the chemically dependent and family will experience. Their characteristics are control, enable, rescue, and can also suffer from stress-related illnesses. The chief enabler can be a parent, spouse, or even a responsible child. As the chemically dependent increasingly loses control in their addiction, the chief enabler makes more and more choices to compensate for this irresponsibility. They act out of a sincere, if not misguided, sense of loyalty, or out of shame and wanting to protect the family. They can bail the chemical dependent out of jail, make excuses for them, they may even lie for them or call in sick for them, just so that they do not feel the repercussions of their actions. Their denial can be just as high as the chemical dependence, and they oftentimes have an incredible tolerance for neglect and abuse. With taking on all of these responsibilities, this is also the person that is blamed when things don't go right within the family. Most enablers feel a great deal of anger, fear, and even maybe resentment towards the chemical dependent person. Healing and growth from this role can include goals of admitting one's powerlessness, sharing their feelings rather than stuffing them down or ignoring them, letting natural consequences occur, and taking care of themselves and setting healthy boundaries. Next up, we have the family hero, who says, "Look at my success. See, we're not that bad." Their role in the family is to provide a sense of accomplishment to the family and take focus away from the chemically dependent person. Their characteristics are perfectionist, leader, organized, fixer, high achiever, and many admirers, but few close friends. This person may be the child that is 9 going on 35. As an adult, they may be successful in their career, but tend to lean towards being a workaholic. They may be defensive in the face of criticism because they don't tolerate being wrong, slow, or not understanding of something, and they also look to gain approval from others, including the chemically dependent. The family hero may eventually turn to drugs and alcohol or other potential addictions to cope with their feelings of inadequacy. Healing and growth from this role can include the goals of relaxation, being a human and accepting mistakes, learning to be vulnerable and expressing emotions, as well as asking for help from others. The next family role is one called the scapegoat, who says, "Look at my mess." Their role in the family is to provide a distraction and explanation for all of the problems in the family. Their characteristics are acting out, anger, distrust, risky behaviors, and strongly valuing peers over family. The scapegoat has learned that they are not valued in their family for who they are, but rather how they perform, and therefore don't want to work as hard as the family hero to prove themselves. They look for good feelings and feelings of acceptance elsewhere than in the family. They may often get into trouble at school. There may be drug or alcohol abuse or experimentation, promiscuity or risky sexual behaviors, and may often be described as difficult to control. They will generally lash out about the problem in the family, but is then seen as the problem instead because of not keeping quiet about said problem. The family will express their anger at the scapegoat, as their anger cannot be expressed openly at the chemical dependent. Healing and growth from this role can include goals of learning to identify and express anger appropriately, accepting responsibility for their own actions, accepting self as someone of value and not as an extension of the chemical dependent, and learning to trust and forgive themselves and others. Next, we have the mascot, also known as the court jester, who says, "Look at my silliness. If we can still laugh, we're okay." Their role in the family is to provide a sense of false security to the system through humor, silliness, and comedic relief. Their characteristics are hyperactive or being high energy, manipulative, sensitive, dependent, irresponsible, and attention-seeking. Living in a family with addiction, a lot of time is spent being angry, fearful, distrustful, and other serious emotions and situations. The mascot uses charm and humor to survive in this very painful family system. They may be the class clown and are so cute and funny that it's hard to stay mad at them or discipline them. So they generally get away with more in the house, or are at least not expected to have the same level of responsibilities as others. They take on the family's negative emotions and try to change them to positive ones. They may not even understand what's causing the negative emotions or problems, but they want to make things better by making people laugh and think of the good times. They may also be at a higher risk of abusing drugs and alcohol due to taking on so much emotional pain. Healing and growth from this role can include the goals of learning to not take on the responsibility for stress in the family, taking oneself more seriously and learning to be okay with all emotions, as well as becoming more independent and responsible. The next role we have is the placater, who works to make things seem normal and says, "Look how helpful I can be. It's not that bad." Their role in the family is to provide a sense of normalcy by placating some of the anger and tension with an easygoing and agreeable attitude. This person doesn't want to cause waves, so their characteristics are people-pleasing, avoiding conflict, enabling, and being codependent. They may do favors or cover for the chemical dependent, maybe even lying, keeping secrets, or buying alcohol and drugs for them in order to keep the peace. They will do the same for other family members, maybe picking up the slack around the house with chores or taking on others' responsibilities. The placater, wanting to keep things on an even keel, is someone that others can listen to or confide in, but they themselves will never voice their true feelings, or may even struggle to identify what their feelings are. Healing and growth from this role can include goals of learning that they are not responsible for another's happiness, getting to know themselves again or maybe even for the first time, identifying their own feelings and realizing that they can be separate from what others are feeling. Last but not least, we have the last family role that I will be discussing, which is the lost child. The lost child says, "Don't look at me at all." This is the person that is set aside with a role to provide a sense of relief to the family system by being the one person in the family that doesn't require anyone's energy or attention. Their characteristics are loner, avoids conflict, shy or reserved, holds in anger, indecisive, and is the person that virtually does not need anything from the family. This person generally has a vivid imagination or fantasy life that they live through vicariously, whether it's through reading, video games, role-playing, etc. They tend to avoid family problems or dynamics, even though they are definitely impacted by them. This is the safest role in the house, as it is not likely to cause trouble for them or others. They have not been able to learn how to form healthy relationships or connections to others in the family, and so they may also struggle to do so outside of the family in public and society. They may be average at school, don't take on leadership roles, and work to draw little to no attention to themselves. They usually hold their anger in rather than expressing it with the mentality of, I can't do anything about it, so why bother? Healing and growth from this role can include the goals of accepting positive attention or compliments, learning how to constructively resolve conflict, expressing feelings openly and directly, especially anger, learn to accept some leadership roles and responsibilities, and learn how to view their independence, creativity, and flexibility as successful and use it to their advantage. So once we have identified our role in the family system, we can begin the healing process, which may be identifying our unhealthy behaviors in order to begin practicing newer, healthier alternatives. Goals for the family system can be open, honest, and respectful communications of feelings and needs, both good and bad, decreasing enabling behaviors and denial, increasing acceptance and gratitude, encouraging individuality, balance with togetherness, and developing positive family rituals, learning flexibility during stressful times, always having choices, and finding support in Al-Anon, professional therapy, church, friends, and each other. With this continuum of unhealthy and healthy characteristics of families, I want you to look at where your family currently sits and look at what changes you could possibly work on. Unhealthy characteristics include feelings aren't okay, only certain feelings are okay. Focus on the performance rather than the person. Lots of secrets and taboo subjects. Everyone conforms to a dominant person. Lots of control, shaming, punishment. Lots of shoulds. Unclear, inconsistent, or rigid rules. Tense, angry, fearful atmosphere. Stress or conflict is avoided. Members feel tired, hurt, disappointed. Growth is discouraged, and members have low self-worth. On the opposite end are healthy characteristics such as feelings are okay and discussed. Focus on the person rather than their performance. Open subjects to be discussed. Individuality is encouraged and accepted as each person is responsible for their own actions. Appropriate and respectful corrections and communications. Fewer shoulds. Clear, flexible rules. Relaxed, joyful atmosphere. Face conflict or stress and work through it. Members feel loved and have energy. Growth is celebrated, and members have high self-worth. Recovery in the family starts with being honest about the real problems and how each person has reacted to certain roles and behaviors. This is done without shame or blame, but with honesty and recognition that we are powerless over the disease of addiction and our loved ones' choices. We cannot take responsibility for the successes or failures of others. Because we are powerless over the disease and our loved ones' actions, the true way to heal and grow is to focus on getting better yourself. If you step out of an unhealthy role and begin caring for yourself, it forces others in the family to adjust. We may not like how they adjust, but we are no longer part of that problem. These changes will take time, but remember, it's progress, not perfection. So look at what you can change and what you can be proud of. In closing, I want to thank you for joining me for this video. I hope it was educational and answered some questions or concerns you may have had as a loved one of someone struggling with substance abuse. If there is one thing that I would love for you to take away from this entire video, it's that you are not alone, that you can reach out, that there are others facing the exact same struggles as you, and that there is no shame in asking for help. As the 3 C's of Al-Anon state, you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. Be well, make good choices, and thank you again.